And thanks everyone for coming. Like Vince said, it is a new show. It is being resurrected. It was certainly something that Corda were always a part of many years ago. And as Vince says, I'd like to think it will be something we'll be a part of again. I'm here with the Carp Porter team today, and obviously to talk to you a little bit about what's going on with Monster Carp, with Spooner's Vlogs, and then what me and Dovey are getting up to for the year ahead. So I think probably the best place to start is the most recent season of Monster Carp. I'd love to think that all of you have watched it. You probably haven't, but we'll sort of resurrect some very good memories from those trips. The pictures that are going to be rolling across in the background, you've got, I guess they're highlights from everything that we've done over the last couple of years. A lot of the ones, I mean, this is what I'm going to talk about first, is Croatia, because that holds incredible memories. It's a ridiculous lake, a lake called Lake Chantepie. I'd been lucky enough to fish it about 5 years previously. I went out with Ali and we filmed a long-range masterclass. I wasn't due to be on that shoot. Dan went out with Al. They're going to be fishing at 120 yards. Lots and lots of bait going out because of the amount of big uns in there. But Dan had been through a surgery maybe 3 or 4 months before on his shoulder. And he's got into the swim. He's wrapped his rods up to 30 wraps. He's had one cast. And he just felt a bit of pain in his shoulder. And what he didn't want to do was do a little bit of filming out there for 3 or 4 days and it affect another year's worth of fishing for him. So I got a phone call at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning from Dan saying, can you fly out to Croatia this afternoon? I'm like, well, as amazing as that sounds, I'm actually going to a wedding, so no, but I can be out there like first thing Monday. So I got to go out there, got to fish. I'd never fished at that sort of range before, 120 yards back then. I'd never done. It's a long way, especially when you're trying to bait very, very accurately on top of it. But got to grips with it. Didn't catch quite as many as Ali, which probably one of the first times he's ever caught more than me, if you want to remind him at any point. But a great trip. And then obviously Monster Carp come about. We'd already filmed a couple of seasons of Monster Carp back then. When Ali left us, the Judas, we had to decide what we were going to do going forward. We got asked so often, are you going to replace Ali? Is someone else going to be the third person? And the problem you've got with that, I don't think it would be fair to put anyone in that situation because Ali is such a unique character. He's so well respected, so well known. So try and replace Ali Hamidi is nigh on impossible. And that person, no matter how good a job he did, no matter how well he got on with us, whether it was a mate of ours or not, someone would always say, yeah, but he's not Ali, is he? And quite rightly, he's not. So rather than put anyone in that position, we felt that we're probably better off doing it on our own, just the two of us. It actually made things a bit easier. It's true what they say, two's company, three's a crowd. And it did prove that. When you're trying to film something, when you've taken a person out of that mix, you're also cutting down your film crew. You're actually, most of the time, doubled up in the same swim. So lots of the funny stuff that happens is far more natural than when you're trying to talk through a walkie-talkie from 3 different corners of the lake. You haven't got that same camaraderie. You haven't got that same, you can't read people's facial expressions. So when I'm next door to Dovey, tell him how bald he's going, it's true, I mean it, and it's funny. So we've gone back to this Lake Chantepie. Dovey's never been there before. When me and Ali had fished it was much later in the year. I think it was late October, November, and 120 yards was as far as you had to go. But speaking to Hervoye, who's our Croatian account manager, he said that's sort of the minimum you want to be going. You probably need to be going 35 wraps. You need to be at 140 yards. Now, again, a bit out of my comfort zone. I'd never done it before. Dovey it's really easy for me to say this when he's not here, but I don't like paying him compliments if I can help it. But he is without doubt one of the best anglers that I've ever been fortunate enough to fish with. Whether he's fishing, whether he's catching fish out of the edge, whether he's catching them at 100 yards fishing tidy, or whether he's having to fish at 180 yards or out in a boat, everything just seems to come naturally, which is part of the reason I detest him so. Because it doesn't come easy for me. I'm not the best carp angler in the world, I'm far from it, but I work hard at trying to get things right. I make sure that the basics are always right, that my rig's not tangled, that my hook's sharp, I'm being accurate with my baiting, and I'm ultimately putting that rig exactly where I want it. That's one of the biggest secrets in carp fishing, is accuracy. Feeding them with bait they want to eat, in an area they want to eat it with a rig that's effective. I know it sounds simple when you say it, but if you get one of those bits wrong, everything else falls away as well. So it's important to get these bits right. So there we are. We're now in Croatia, and I've got to fish at 140 yards, putting a lot of bait out. We ended up fishing for, I think, 5 days. We weren't fishing the nights, mainly because, with 2 reasons. Most of the bites on that lake come in the day anyway, and throughout the course of a day, you're probably putting between us, probably 70 kilos a day is what you're baiting with. Lots of maize, lots of tigers, pellet, boilie, tigers, and you're spotting at 140 yards. It's not just getting it out there, it's then reeling it all the way back in every time. It's relentless. So I'd never done it before. Dovey's fished further than that, so he was going to be right in his comfort zone, but we decided we were just going to fish next to each other, effectively fish one big area between us, and obviously, in true Monster Carp style, there's going to be a match involved. Now, Dovey doesn't have the best track record when it comes to fishing a match against me. He's a much better angler than me. I've got no shame in admitting that, but I don't know what it is. Things just go right for me when we have a match. So we decided, rather than it just be, all of your fish caught, making one big total weight, rather than doing that, we just make it your biggest mirror and your biggest common combined. And we knew that there's lots of big carp. I think the biggest in there is like 92 pound common, a number of 80 pounders, a number of 70 pounders, and they genuinely don't know how many 50s and 60s they've got. It's ridiculous. And we do try to get that across in any of our filming that we do, that a monster carp is relative to where you're fishing. If you're fishing a commercial fishery over here, where the average size of fish is 10 pound, a 20 pounder in that setting is a monster. Same with Croatia. You're going there because you're trying to catch the biggest they have to offer, a 40 and a 50 pounder. Really, I don't want it to sound blasé, because it's not how it's meant to sound, but there was lots of 40s and 50s that we were catching and just putting back, because you're catching so many. I can't explain or really put into sort of good words how impressive and special that lake is. But whilst the big one in there is a massive common, commons themselves are quite rare. So we started the match, it was going along lovely. I had the first few bites, which is brilliant. And very early on, I'd caught a mirror of over 50 pound, and I think I'd caught a small common as well. So things were looking great. I think it was day 2 or day 3, Dovey's then caught a 74 pound, 5 ounce mirror. Not only did it beat his PB, but I had the long-standing bragging rights of having caught a bigger carp than Tom Dove, again, which he absolutely hated. He did not, again, I know lots of you will have seen it, but he did not stop going on about it. What's your PB, Spoons? Every time I pick the rod up, like, yeah, Dovey, it's 71.12, you know it's 71.12. He's like, yeah, it's not 74 though, is it? Constant, but I deserved that. I'd given it to him for so long that I absolutely deserved it. But I wasn't out of the match, because we know there's fish in there bigger than that, and he still hasn't caught a common, and he couldn't catch one. Then I caught a bigger mirror, then I caught a bigger common. So all of a sudden, even though he's had a 70 pounder, I'm still about 30 pound in the lead. Until later on in the trip, Dovey catches a massive common. I can't remember the exact weight. I think it was probably over 60 pound. And it turned out, with a day to go, for me to win this match, I had to either catch a common bigger than I'd ever caught before, or a mirror bigger than I'd ever caught before. And Dovey started to get cocky. He reeled in, he was going down the shops to buy the crew treats, properly giving it the big one. And it got to the point where we'd had such a good trip. The crew that work with us are tireless in what they do. You know, me and Dovey end up getting the plaudits for Monster Carp, because we're the 2 people that you see on the TV all the time. But without the guys behind us filming it, being up all hours, being as energetic as we are, without all that going on, you wouldn't get a show anywhere near as good. If it was, if you had a lackluster cameraman trying to film us be excited, it doesn't work. So the crew get overlooked, and lots of them are anglers. So imagine that as an angler, right? You're going out somewhere for somewhere between a week and 2 weeks, and you're literally sitting there watching 2 people fish, and you don't get to have a go. I couldn't do it. I'll hold my hands up now. I couldn't do it. So Dovey said, tell you what, Spoons, next bite is the last bite. We've had a great trip. We'll finish a day early. We'll stay here so the crew can have a go. I was like, I don't know, Dovey, I don't like losing to you. I asked him an honest question. I said, if the roles were reversed, if you were in the losing position and I said this to you, what would you do? And he sort of looked at me and he went, mate, I've lost most of the times that I've fished against you, so I would honestly accept the offer. And he's, Dovey is honest. I went, all right, let's do it. So I made a tiny rig tweak for the last cast I was probably going to make, in that out of all the bait we'd fed up to now, I can't remember what it worked out, I think it's about 250 kilos we've probably put in up to this point. Lots of it maize to keep the cost down. Yeah, it's a lot, isn't it? I was massive. But we'd never tried maize on the hook. So I'm going through my tackle box. I found 2 little grains of IB fake maize. I've put them out just off the side of the spot. We've all read the articles where it says the big uns might be lurking off of the side of the main bait, and I thought, I've got nothing to lose. So I've put these 2 grains of maize just off the side. Dovey laughed at it, said it's desperation. Half hour later, after he's made the statement, that rod's pulled up tight. So I've picked it up, playing it in, and as I'm playing it in, my other rod's gone as well. So Dovey's picked that one up. So we're both playing them, and he's like, how's yours feel? I went, yeah, it feels pretty good. He's like, yeah, this one does as well. 3 minutes later, the one he's playing somehow falls off. I went, this is sabotage. I said, what if that was a 70-pounder? He went, well, you'd have won the match, but we'll never know. So I've carried on playing this fish in, still feeling pretty big. And in the margin, you had this steep drop-off, and off that drop-off was this horrible weed that I'd already lost like 2 or 3 carp in throughout the week. And it's buried itself in. I'm like, no, it's in the weed. Everything's gone solid. And I thought it'd come off. And I just put a little bit more pressure on. And you've probably all had a fish weed you up. You get that satisfying lunge of a carp when you know it's still there. And it's done that, kicked its way out, popped up. Dovey's netted it, and he went quiet. I'm like, that's a good sign. He's worried here. He's worried. So I've gone to have a look. I'm like, how big do you reckon that is, Dove? He's like, I don't know. Looks pretty big, that. I went, that's a good 60, that, isn't it? He went, that's what I thought. He said, but whenever you think it's a big 60, however big, if you think it's a big 50, it's often 60. If you think it's a big 40, it's often a 50. He said, so if we think it's a big 60, that might be a 70. I'm like, no. Trying to sort of play it down. I don't want to get too excited. I don't want to nick another trophy from him at the death. And I'm sort of looking at it. Anyway, we've got the scales out. I wasn't reading it. We've hoisted it aloft. And at £72.15, not only was it a new PB for me, not as big as Dovey's PB, admittedly, but it was a match winner. And I've never seen... Dovey's like, how has this happened? He's like, I've been so far ahead for 24 hours. He's looking at it going, that is not possible that it's happened. So people asked us, was that really the last bite of the trip? Because that's how it's portrayed in the episode. I'm like, it was, genuinely. The best thing about it, we did all the filming. I was drinking gin and tonic out of the trophy in front of Dovey, just to wind him up even further. And we still had about 3 hours of daylight left. So we're like, lads, you have a go. Jack Booth, one of the cameramen, he's cast Dovey's rods out onto his spot. The next bite off of Dovey's spot was a 65-pound common that would have won him the match. I've never been so happy walking away. In fact, if what I like to try and do, when I've come to do a talk, I've just done another couple of talks up at another show in the north of the country, and Dovey wasn't there then either, he left it to me. If anyone has got an Instagram account, just send him a message, just saying, why is Spooner better than you? He'll love that. He will love that. Okay, so Croatia, big tick in the box. Opening episode of season 8, fantastic. And it's a lake I'm planning to go back in February. It will be incredibly cold, but then there'll be something like, 10 fish over 80 pound, maybe 3 or 4 over 90 pound as well. So whilst it won't be comfortable to fish in, it's not going to be as prolific. Probably won't have to fish as far. That stuff is big, actually. You're sitting there thinking, what if that next bite is the one? And it will give me a chance to nick the bragging rights back off of Dovey. But from there, what we tried to do with Monster Carp, we tried to offer a different mix of fishing. If we only went to that type of venue where you're constantly spodding, casting a long way, catching lots and lots of carp. It's great fun. I'm never going to not want to do that sort of fishing. But if we only ever did the same thing, it would become quite boring. And we like the adventure side of it. We like the commercial side of it when the timing's right. So straight after that one, the next episode that you would have seen, totally different, was South Africa. Now, you're going from a busy city, a busy country like Croatia, where we more or less know what's swimming around to a certain extent. Then you're going to a 600-acre lake, the other side of the world, and you really don't know what's in there. It's done big fish in the past, but because the lake is surrounded by little villages that are, poverty is a massive thing in South Africa, and these people have got nothing. So when the carp are spawning, if they can chuck a net over it and they can feed their village or feed the family, that's what they're going to do. So just because a carp gets put back into the lake and it's once done a 50-pounder, does not mean that 50-pounder is still in there anymore. So we went there with quite a simple target. We wanted to leave with a fish that we felt was a monster in relative terms, and we felt that was a 40-pounder. A 40-pounder wild lake, almost definitely going to be a common. There aren't many mirrors out there. That would be our target for that trip. So we've turned up. One of the only times I've beaten Dovey at rock, paper, scissors, which was amazing because the left-hand side of the swim definitely looked better. It's where we were seeing the fish show. So I've won that. We've got the rods out, and it was pretty quiet. We're seeing the odd fish show in the morning. You're seeing them show. We were fishing at about, from memory, about 500 metres out. So you're fishing a long way. Everything's being taken out in a boat. Every time, even if you want to change your rig, it's like you're respooling every time. But you're going out in a boat, winding it down, and with nothing on the end, just to change your rig, drop it back down, bit of fresh bait, and tow it all the way back. So it tests that type of angling ability a lot different. It's very, very different to casting a long way, but brings with it its own set of challenges and own sets of stuff that you've got to get your head round. Again, we've done quite a bit of that type of fishing now, so there's not many. Sure, some will come up, but there's not many carp fishing situations that we've not faced. So we always have an idea of how we're going to approach it. So a couple of days in, not much has happened, and we were both just sitting there chatting. And I had a random single bleep on the left-hand rod, and we've sort of looked up. The bobbin had dropped by about 2 inches, and as we've watched it, we've just watched the tip absolutely smash down, bobbin flying up, all hell broke loose. Running around to get in a boat, getting the life jackets on, Dovey coming out to net it with someone else driving it, and the whole time heart in the mouth stuff, because you can still feel the fish, but you sort of lose that element of contact because you're racing out there as quick as you can. You're madly trying to keep up with it, but it's almost not possible. But eventually you do. You get almost over the top of the fish, and as I said earlier, when a fish comes out of the weed, you get that satisfying lunge. When you get back over the top of a fish in a boat and you feel that again, that's a real special moment. And this fish rolled, and we were like, oh my God, that's pretty big. It didn't fight too much once you're out there. I mean, it's already been on for probably 20 minutes. Couple of lunges, bundled it in the net. It didn't really matter how big it was. We were so happy just to get off the mark relatively early in the trip. I think we had 8 days on that lake in total. So third day in, we've had our first bite. But that first bite often unlocks what's working. Got it back to the bank, got the rod back out, towed it all back out, got that reset, because you don't know how limited your bite time is going to be on these big lakes. You don't want to sit there, and as much as you want to enjoy that fish and get it on the bank and have a proper look at it, because we're filming, we need to make the most of every opportunity. So everything's back in position, and it wasn't until we weighed it that the very first bite we caught, we set out to achieve what we wanted to. I think it was 40 pound, 10 ounces. It'll pop back up at some point. It just potentially never been caught before. It was one that the local carp syndicate that fish on there, they didn't necessarily recognise it. I don't think they keep, like if you join a lake now, you know how many fish are in there quite a lot of the time, exactly what ones you're fishing for. You all might have a target fish that you'd really like to catch. It's not quite that intense in South Africa. They've got these massive, massive dams. They get to go and fish. And that's what they do. They just go and fish. You've got a few of them that are probably more like us in that they're really honed into that carp fishing syndicate life. But that isn't for everybody. But they certainly didn't recognise it. There it is. 40 pound 10 of amazing common. And obviously, being a South African PB, Dovey revelled in chucking a load of water over me. But the trip just went incredibly well. We both started catching relatively consistently, and Dovey, he's had that knack over the years of catching a real big, and he really pulled it out the park with a 47 pounder, I think it was, again, right towards the end of the trip. And that is the biggest fish that lake had ever done was like 51. So that is one of the real A-team, which he, again, still reminds me about. So after an adventure like that, you sort of had a commercial long-range fishery. Croatia, it's not the easiest place to get to. It's a long, it's a 2-day travel. You can fly there and sort your kit out once you're there, but we appreciate that it's not the easiest thing to do, quite a daunting thing to do. South Africa, exactly the same. An 11-hour flight, sorting your kit out once we're out there. We're fortunate, and then we've got a South African team. We've got a distributor out there that sells quarter tackle around the Johannesburg and Durban area. So we knew that we could fly out with a few bits. Like we could take our rods, our reels, our tackle box, bite alarms, but things like bivvies, bed chairs, bait, they could sort out for us. So it's a massive weight off your mind, and you haven't got to think about that. But we also like to try and do a trip which I guess is more achievable by everybody. So we went to the Road Lake in France. We've been to Gigantica before. We went to the Road Lake on the complex as well, because that's something that anyone can do. Literally pick up the phone to Gigantica, you can book yourself on a 3.5-hour journey in France, and you're on the lake. So we gave that a go. Again, we made it a match. We didn't want to add everything up. We just said biggest fish wins. It's quite a simple thing. I think we've all done it with our mates when we've been fishing. A little bit of bragging rights, a little £5 bet here and there. Whoever catches the biggest takes the pot. And it was another one that Dovey beat me on. He had a pretty good season, to be fair. We fished hard for a week. I moved I think I fished 3 different swims in the course of the week, just trying to find some better fish. I was in a swim early doors, was getting plenty of bites. I think I caught them to 42 pound, which is an amazing carp. But again, it's relative. We knew that the Road Lake holds probably 15 fish over 60 pound, 40 fish over 50 pound. Dovey'd already had a really early 47 pounder, so I always felt like I was on the back foot. So I was trying to chase it a little bit, but I wasn't doing anything that somebody else couldn't do. I was baiting up spots swims that were empty. I was putting some bait in at night, going to try them, getting a bite, and it'd be another small one. Had a move on the last night. Had 3 bites on the last night. Nothing over 20 pound, and you just no matter what I tried that week, I wasn't going to beat him. But it just showed a different element to the fishing that we do. Another type that's there to offer for everybody to have a go at. And then finally, the last episode of the series was to arguably the best carp lake in the world, and that was Lac de Chantepie in northern France, not far from Gigantica actually. But when it's full, it's a dam, so the water level fluctuates. We went there when it was absolutely brimming, and you're talking 15,000 acres. That's a lot of water to get lost in. I travelled through the night. You have to book your swims. We'd booked these swims about a year in advance, because that's how the booking systems worked. And we had 2 areas the first week and 2 areas the second week. So I said to Dovey, I'll meet you in this spot. I've met him there at about 8 in the morning, something like that, having driven through the night, had a look, and it's just like an ocean. You literally can't see the other side. You're like, Christ, okay. Should go and have a look at the other swim. And I've put it into my sat-nav, and it was a 32-minute drive to get to the other swim on the same lake. And you're like, oh my God. But the reason it's considered the best lake in the world is because the carp don't give themselves up. You could be miles away from them, but it has grown, arguably, I don't even think it is an argument, the best common in the world. It's a wild common, and I think at its peak weight, it's been 105 pound. So that's the dream. The chances of catching that fish are infinitely against anyone that tries, but that's what keeps people going. It's got more fish of over 30 kilos, 66 pound, than any other public wild lake in the world, and that's the dream. I've got friends that go there regularly, often, leave empty-handed, and that is the realities of fishing that type of lake. And we knew, it's the first time we've ever done this. We didn't compete for swims. We didn't want to feel that any one had a better chance than the other. We are, as much as we like the banter, we like taking the rise out of each other, we absolutely like to beat each other. We are very much a team, and we knew that we'd have to work together to get a result here. So For the first time ever, we actually alternated our rods. We had between 6 and 8 rods out, depending on the swims that we were in, and it was literally one of Tom's, one of mine, one of Tom's, one of mine, and whoever got a bite, that's just the way it went. And we did a week in the first swim, and other than seeing fish at about 800 yards out where you're not allowed to fish for them, that's all we saw. Nothing in close. Oh, Tom caught a tench, and that was it. You imagine that. You've got... Each episode of Monster Carp costs somewhere in the region of £50,000 to £75,000 to film. So we're talking a lot of money, and we are staring a massive blank in the face. Not a failure, because we actually said to catch anything from this lake will be a result. We knew we weren't going to be going there to catch 10, 20 carp. A bite was what we were there for. We've made our move to the opposite side, and there was a couple of days where the weather was due to really blow into us, and that's what that lake's all about. Not only about having, you can have your rigs in the perfect spots, but you need everything to line up. You need the weather to be right. You need the air pressure to be right. Sometimes, you know, the moon phase plays a big part, and we timed the second part of our trip to perfection. One night, the wind's blowing into us all day. You're fishing, bearing in mind you're fishing this massive lake, 15,000 acres. Most of our rods at this point are about 30 yards out, because we knew that's where they get pushed into on these massive winds. We've had nothing all day, nothing that night, and the wind's eased off, and we're like, one night, basically one proper night left where the weather's perfect. And it blew, and thankfully this time the wind blew into us all night. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, one of Dovey's rods that was probably 30 yards off, just down to our right, we're buried in amongst these trees. He's had a flurry of bleeps, and he was away. And we left with it was 37 pounds, 7 ounces, I think, if I remember rightly. But that fish ranks so high up in, well, it's not in my album, I didn't catch it, but in Dovey's album, it is one of his most treasured captures ever. And we both said, like, you get mixed reviews. You get people that say, cool, blimey, you won't go back there again, will you? I'm like, you're joking. Of all the places I've ever fished, that's the one I want to go back to the most. When you've had failure, when a lake's beating you up, I can only ever think about getting back there to try and right that wrong. And we're just in the process of booking another trip out there. We will definitely be going back. We'll probably go and fish it towards the back end of the year, like September, October time. So you'll lose about 3,000 or 4,000 acres of water where it's been drained out, but then you're dealing with having to live in waders the whole time in sort of that much mud. It's going to be utter hell, but we will love every second of it. So that was sort of Monster Carp wrapped up for last year. And then what me and Tom are doing, I'm conscious that I've got a little bit of time left, and I always like to have a little bit of a Q&A at the end. So hopefully, again, a load of you have seen Spooner's vlog come about 2 years ago, and that's something that I've got to thank Ali for. Before Ali left, it was a concept that was come up within the marketing department about doing some sort of what we call short form filming. Lots of the stuff that we produce is very, very polished, whether it's Masterclass, Thinking Tackle, Monster Carp. To give you a bit of an idea, a Monster Carp might take between a week to 2 weeks to film, but it then takes between 8 to 10 weeks to edit. You imagine all that footage they've got, because they're filming 24/7, they've got to get it down to 46 of the best minutes. And that is really not an easy job. Thinking Tackle's the same, maybe not quite as intense, but it still takes 20 days to edit. The vlog, you get what you see. If I make a mistake, we're not going to redo it. That's just what happens. So we got to go out and film this blog type material where it was just following my fishing. And Ali said, if someone's doing that, it should be Spoons, because he does more diverse fishing, or more diverse carp fishing than almost anybody else. Most people have got what they want to do. They want to sit on a syndicate, they want to target a carp, fine. I like doing that as well. But I'm happy to go to Norton Disney to fish a runs water on one of them. I'm happy to take my kids fishing. I'm happy to go out just because we've got to do a video on a bit of new tackle that comes out. Doesn't really bother me. My passion has always been getting the rods out. I just want to go fishing. I don't care what I'm fishing for. If I'm sat there with my kids and I know the biggest we're going to catch is 6 pound, who cares? That bite, when that Delkin goes into meltdown, it's that bit probably what got me hooked in the first place, and it's still what keeps me going every single time. I don't think there's a better sound than whatever bite alarm you use going into full meltdown. It's that battle cry. And when that gets boring, that's when I'll stop, and frankly, I don't think that'll be ever. So that's how the vlog was. That's how the vlog was born. We just went out, did a load of just random fishing, and it's. Sorry, I will talk about that fish quickly. When you fish what they call the main bowl at Chantepie, which is the 15,000 acre bit, you've got the South Basin, where the fish always go to spawn. I chucked a couple of solid bags out in there one afternoon, and Dovey said it didn't count. Even though this South Basin is over 1,000 acres, I caught 2 carp, and he said, no, they're not proper shanty fish. So they don't count, apparently. So yeah, that's how Spooner's vlog came about. Eddie Hall got to do some random filming with the world's strongest man. One thing about him, right? He's a bodybuilder, incredibly strong. All he was interested about, he got his rods out, we caught him a fish, and he went, is there any records for casting? Like, what do you mean? He went, well, what's the world record? Who's cast the furthest? I'm like, well, yeah, there is. I said, it's over 200 yards. He's like, I can beat that. And we sort of like, you probably can't, but if anyone's going to do it on brute strength alone, it's going to be him. His second ever cast, he cast 150 yards. I've never cast 150 yards. But I said to him, if you had like a few hours out with someone like Terry Edmonds or Mark Hutchinson and absolutely honed your technique, he probably would be pushing for the world record. I've never heard a rod make that noise without breaking. It was incredible. But yeah, so it's allowed us a load of weird and wonderful types of fishing, and it allows us for it not to be polished. You can just see us going fishing because, yeah, when you watch a thinking tackle and you watch us talking in absolute detail about the rig, about every component that we're using, people say, do you do that in one take? You're like, no. Sometimes you get lucky and you reel it off first time, but more often than not, you've done it 10 times and you've knitted the perfect bit together so that it all makes perfect sense for you guys watching it. So very, very polished, very necessary. I think we know Dan has always wanted to pass over every bit of information that's needed to help everybody to tie a better rig, to spod better, to fish off the surface better. We want to do as much as we can to help everybody get a few more bites. That's ultimately what it's about. With a vlog, if I drop the odd swear word and it just means a bleep goes over it, it's great. And then it leads us on to what we're going to be doing going forward. So you may have heard me and Dovey mention it last year. We've got this concept, Spooner and Dovey Versus. And it's going to be a new YouTube channel that we're doing. It's all through Corda. It's not one you've got to pay for. It's all free content still. But, and there might be a couple of you amongst us here. I don't know. I hope not. But whatever video Corda put out, no matter how many carp we've caught, how we've done it, there'll always be a few comments that say, along the lines of, it's all right for you, lake's been shut for weeks and baited for you. One, it hasn't. I'd love it if it was, but it really hasn't. Or two, you get someone to say, yeah, that won't work at my lake. They wouldn't be able to do that down here. And we're going to call them people out. We're going to challenge them. Going, all right then, mate, put your money where your mouth is. We'll come to your lake. We'll have a match, me and Dovey, Spooner and Dovey, or Dovey and Spooner as it will probably be called, against you and one of your mates. We'll come and film it. We'll have a 24-hour match, and we'll just see what happens. We get asked all the time if we can go filming with, you guys that would like to watch what we do. If you ever want to be a part of it, when the videos go out, we'll be challenging you. So please pick a good venue, and we'll come and have a go. We'll have a right laugh. Hopefully we'll win. If we don't, that's funny as well, isn't it? It'll be good fun. And we have just actually been out. What it's going to do, like I said, I don't know, feel like I've been boring you for ages, but about halfway through I said that when it comes to a carp fishing situation, we have been faced with pretty much most things that we're ever likely to get faced with, and that's great. We're competent carp anglers, but there's a big, massive world of different types of fishing out there that we haven't got a clue about, and that was highlighted this week when we went down to Plymouth and we had 2 days out on a tuna boat. Now, it's all been filmed for a Spooner and Dovey. Spooner and Dovey versus Monster Tuna, like the crossover. And you'll have to watch it to see how we got on. All I can say is that I went to play darts last night and I couldn't reach the 20 because it was too high. My arms were still hurting so much. Everything ached like I'd been in the gym for a week, and I've not been to the gym for I've not been to a gym. But yeah, it's the most intense fishing I've ever done. I remember one little snippet. From the point of getting a bite, there's 4 rods out. It was my turn to play one of these tuna in, and before you can pick that rod up, the other 3 rods have got to be reeled in first. That takes about a minute and a half. in that minute and a half, from the point of the bite to me being allowed to hold the rod, it had taken 500 yards of line. And you're just looking at this spool just absolutely shredding. And all you can think is, I've got to reel that back in a minute. But if any of you get the chance to do it, the southwest coastline currently has some of the best tuna fishing on the entire planet. So if you ever get a chance to do it, you really, really should. So I've got literally 5 or 6 minutes left. I'd love if anyone's got any questions they want to ask, then put your hands up, please. There we go. I want to come to you, mate, so I can hear you. Sorry, mate.
Hello, mate. You all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I go to France next year, Bill's Lake 5, and they've got a massive issue at the moment with poisson chat. So we're wondering what's your kind of advice to avoid them as best as possible?
Okay, so everyone can hear it. The guy's going to Bill's Lake 5, and they've got a massive problem with poisson chat, which are essentially like a small catfish, aren't they? I've not fished too many places where there's been a problem. I've certainly been to places where I've caught them. Are you allowed to use, what bait are you allowed to use? Is there any restrictions? You're allowed to use nuts. If you can use nuts, that often once I get a problem with some form of, I hate the term nuisance species because someone would like to catch them, but to a carp angler, whether it's a bream, a tench or poisson chat, they are a nuisance at times. Nuts can be the best way of deterring them, because with a tiger nut, they're not the most openly attractive thing. They're not oozing the same amount of goodness as boilies and other particles, but when carp find them, they gorge on them. But it might do enough to stop the poisson chat and just give you a chance to have your rig sitting out there for a period of time so the carp can actually find it. A lot of these big lakes that we fish, we don't use a lot of boilie for that reason. There's always catfish about, which Dovey's great at catching. But yeah, tiger nuts make up a big part of our sort of massive lake fishing. No worries. Have we got any more questions? Got to be one more. Thank you.
What's the biggest difference you find between fishing in France or in South Africa compared to the UK?
So the guys asked the biggest difference between fishing in places like France, Croatia, or the UK. So you've got those three examples that you've picked, you've got three quite different ones. I would say Croatia, the thing that you're faced with no matter what lake you go, is that I've spent a bit of time with the Croatian national team, and everything that they do is based on range. They believe that when they're fishing the international matches, if they can cast further than anybody, once you're in a period where everyone's fishing around a lake, if you're the furthest one out, you're going to get the quickest bites. So when you turn up to these lakes, what feels like a long way to us, 120, 140 yards, when we actually got into that swim in Croatia, the guy there before us was fishing 170 with ease, like it was nothing. So that's one thing when you go to Croatia. Over here, if I'm fishing at 80 yards, free on a spot, that feels like a decent distance. A lot of people can fish that range. You start to creep to 100. Fishing 100 yards accurately is not something that lots of us have the lakes to do, so we don't do it very often. So when you go to somewhere like Croatia and everyone's fishing almost double that with ease, you're on the back foot straight away. And the other thing with Croatia is the amount of bait. They don't set a trap like we do and wait for it to get tripped and catch one. They just do not stop baiting. And the fish have become tuned in. We've said the saying before, that ringing the dinner bell. That's what the Croatian fish are. If you're not spodding, the fish leave you alone. They just go. It's the noise of the spod, of the repetition that keeps them coming back and keep them feeding. France, I think one of the big things that people expect to go to France and catch fish because it's easy, there's loads of big ones. But what people don't always appreciate is that those fish in France are almost fished for 24/7, 365 days a year. And you're often walking into a swim, like somewhere like Gigantica or the Road Lake or Abbey Lakes, Crete Lakes. As one bloke reels in, there's about a 2-hour break before the next one's going in and casting back out again. Those fish don't get any sort of respite. And then finally, I think that the thing with the UK type of fishing that a lot of other people don't have is that most of our lakes are an incredibly rich mixed fishery. So you can't always get away with using the bait that is probably the most attractive to a carp, because as soon as you put, say, maggots or worms or casters in, you might have a bream, a roach, a tench, a perch, whatever it might be, attacking your spot. So I think they're the sort of differences that you're faced with. Right. Probably got time for one more question. There we go. Cheers, Vince.
You talk about where you fish for the TV. Where would you fish for you? Where do you enjoy going fishing when the pressure's off? It's just you.
Great question. I wish I had a lake like that at the minute. So I've just got a couple of syndicate tickets they've just started. I've got a Frimley ticket, which is a syndicate lake, not close to where I live, but it's got a lovely history to it. It's been in the carp fishing circles for many, many years. It's got 3 fish over 50 pound and goodness knows how many over 40 pound. And if I had lots and lots of time, that's the only lake I'd go to. What I like about carp fishing and what I've liked about my prior years carp fishing is getting in tune with a lake, learning how to catch fish from that lake in particular, and then gaining momentum until the bigger ones come along. I've never been one that wanted to turn up, catch one fish and disappear. I'm not a bounty hunter. I enjoy being at a lake for 2, 3, 4 years, however long it takes, until I feel like in most situations I can sort of turn up and get a bite. I've got another syndicate ticket starting at the same time called Bayswater, and that one will tick a few more waters because it's right in between work and home. And again, talking about repetition, being able to bait a lake regularly, not with lots of bait, but regularly baiting with a bit of boilie, just sort of tunes the fish into spots that you want to catch them from. And because that's well located, I always feel like pre-baiting is you're fishing when you're not there. When there's no lines in them, when they've got free food, they gain their confidence. And if you can do that over a little period of time until you get the time to actually go fishing, by the time you're ready to cast your rigs out, it's almost like they're queuing up, waiting for your baited rig to go out. So that's my preferred type of fishing. Syndicate waters. They don't have to have a fish that's a PB, for argument's sake. I don't really fish for weights and size. I weigh every fish I catch, but I don't have to worry about them being 40 pound. If I catch a lovely 10 pounder, 20 pounder, whatever it is, it's just about getting bites that will always keep me going. And I reckon that is about the end. So thank you everybody for coming to the show and supporting Vince, and for coming to listen to me whittle on. Thank you. Cheers.